From Rays of the One Light, and these are weekly commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita, and they're based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda and written by Swami Kriya-yoga. Truth invites, it never commands. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. Free will is a basic principle of life. God never coerces. He invites us to live in such a way that we find fulfillment in ourselves. If we refuse to live rightly, Paramahansa Yogananda taught that God simply says, I will wait. We have eternity to live, and in that eternity, we live as we choose, in self-created darkness, or as we choose, or in the infinite light, the true self, which is God. Jesus Christ, in the Beatitudes, offered a beautiful example of God's way of inviting mankind to seek perfection, not by commanding, but by offering his human children the incentive that they need to choose the right of their own volition. Blessed are the pure in spirit, Jesus said, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. In each of the Beatitudes, Jesus explains the blessing attendant upon observing it. The divine way, similarly for each of us, is not to do violence to our own natures. Spirituality must be attained naturally. It can never be attained by force. The Bhagavad Gita says in the 3rd chapter, even the wise behave in accordance with nature as it is manifested in them, and of what avail then is suppression. The scripture then goes on, however, to explain that this does not mean we should surrender to the dictates of our lower nature. Rather, it emphasizes our need to aspire to the heights by each of us in accordance with his own nature and not in imitation of anyone else's, offering ourselves up for purification by divine grace. The Bhagavad Gita, desire, whatever form it takes, so the Bhagavad Gita explains, should be resisted, even if only mentally. Attachment and repulsion to sense objects, both of these are universally rooted. No one should accept their influence, for verily they are man's enemies. And thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om. So I'd like to start with a little exercise that I saw Jyotish do one time. Jyotish is the head of the Ananda community now. He's a successor to Swami Kriya-yoga. And it illustrates very perfectly what I want to talk about, which is he asked everyone to sit quietly for about 10 seconds, which I'm going to ask you to do. So close your eyes and let's just try to be as still as possible for a few moments. So now you can all open your eyes and you can ask yourself these questions. Was I perfectly still? Was I kind of still? Was I even a little less still than that? Or was it, what the heck, I wasn't still at all, and you just let it go out the window? So ask yourself, I'm not going to quiz you on it, but ask yourself these questions. So if you answered yes to I was not still at all, everything just kind of went out the window, then you're probably more on the mark than the rest of us who thought we sat very still. And when you think that the earth rotates at about 1,000 miles an hour, and then it rotates around the sun about 67,000 miles an hour, and then our solar system continues to rotate into other solar systems, and it goes out further and further and further until we're actually millions of miles speeding in the course of an hour. For the sun, for the earth to rotate as it does, 1,000 miles an hour, that's 18.5 seconds a minute. So when you realize that, you have to ask yourself, well, what's doing that? And if something else, and we'll call it God or Spirit, is doing that, then are we stationary, or what's moving through us? And what's keeping everything else, which we think of, we're in a delusion thinking that everything else is just as static and as stationary as we are. Because we cannot feel the reality of the earth moving. We cannot feel the reality of the solar system moving as quickly as it does, and yet it is. And we're held here by gravity. So it makes you realize that what control do we really have? What control do we really think we have over anything that is outside of ourselves? And it makes you also realize, if you think about it, that the mind has absolutely minuscule, if teeny tiny, tiny, tiny ability to control anything. Because God is doing it all. And yet we're under the delusion that it's us that's doing it. And so God not only created us, the solar systems, but He created it based on duality, which is, for every light there's dark, for every good there's evil, or for every up there's down. And because we have to have duality in order for the universe to exist, in order for creation to exist, we've got to be in a state of duality, a state of dual. So even the desires that we have are in a dualistic manner, but they're all created by God. They're all created by by the divine, by Spirit. And there are things that we are striving for. We're kind of set up to do that. The real true desire that God gave us, which is buried somewhere beneath us, is a desire to know Him. That is really the desire that we're shooting for. And Master says that we're all, what we're doing here, what our goal is to find God. Or to find, even step back, to find happiness. We don't have any control over these desires. They are universally rooted, and we choose. We make the decision, and this is where our free will does come in, because God gave us free will. So this is where it comes in. We have the ability to choose God, or to choose a particular desire or attachment. And that's it. Ananda Ma said, we're on a train, and our karma is on a track, and it's moving in a particular direction, and really all we have the ability to do is to stand in the front of the train, or to stand in the back of it. If we stand in the back, we magnetize to ourselves, and if we want to stay steeped in desire, as the reading said, if we want to stay steeped in desire and attachment, we bring unhappiness to ourselves. If we move to the front of the train and we want to try to attune to something higher, then we bring goodness and happiness into our lives. And it's kind of that simple. It's hard to break it down and to realize how simple it really is. God does not force us to do anything that is outside of our nature. He's not, he's not trying to make me a brain surgeon or someone else a theater person or an actor, which I was before I came to Ananda many years ago. And when I did that, I thought, okay, that's it. And I sold my makeup equipment and got rid of anything that said theater to me. And I moved to Ananda many years ago. And it didn't stop, because it wasn't long before people started asking me to do plays. Swami Kriya-yoga got me involved. He wasn't going to, he wanted to use my abilities to perhaps direct a play or whatever. It was really for my benefit, partly for the community, but a lot for my benefit. Because it's not about just shoving these things aside and just saying they don't exist anymore. It's about learning how to work with them and how to refine them and how we move closer and closer to the divine as we work through our own dharma, as we work through our own karma. It's a purification process, service, meditation, all taking us in this one direction towards bliss. But we still have this dual nature within us, and we're trying to integrate that duality and put it into bliss, ultimately. So that we get to the point where that's all there is for us. We get to where we don't want what the playthings are that Divine Mother puts out for us. We want only her. We want only bliss. And when we get to a state where we're ready to start moving seriously on that path, on that direction, then she brings us a guide, Yogananda. But let me back up a second, because I want to just emphasize how God does not force us in any way. It's not like he wants us to delve into our lower natures. That's not it. It wasn't that he wanted me to just kind of keep doing theater the way I was doing it. He wanted me to move it in a different direction, because everything's directional. When you have your karma, it's directional. You move in a particular direction, and you're not going to jump from point A to point B. I'm not going to jump from being an actor here and then a brain surgeon here. That's not what he's saying. It's not about that. There's a man named Baba Haridas, and he is a saint, and he was born in the 18th century. And he had a lot of power, a lot of deep spiritual power. And they closed off his nose, they buried him, they put him inside a vault, and they buried him in the ground for 40 days. And then they brought him up, and they had all kinds of ways of testing to see what had happened and so forth. And a group of French physicians were there, and they declared him dead when he was brought up. And as soon as they did, through his willpower, he brought himself back and his body into an active state. So he was back to normalcy. Okay, this is an extremely powerful individual in terms of yogic abilities. So then he was out one time with a Christian minister on a boat, and he said, "What does your Jesus have that I don't have?" And he said, "Well," the missionary said, "Well," because they were in a boat, he said, "he can walk on water." He said, "Oh, that's easy." So he got up and he was walking along, and then the boat was following him as he was walking. And so he'd passed that. And then, but there was a local Raja who saw through it, and he said, there's still some traces of ego here. And Baba Haridas then decided that he was going to go and live with a woman and be with a woman. And for him, that was quite a step down, because he had achieved such a high level of spirituality. But then he decided that he did the wrong thing, and he went back to his students and he apologized, and he said, I was wrong in what I did. And Master, who told this story, Yogananda, he said, God recognized that he no longer wanted stale cheese, but he wanted fresh cheese. So in other words, he wanted God. He realized that he no longer wanted anything of the world. He just wanted God. He just wanted that bliss state. And one of the disciples said, well, but isn't that really, isn't he going to be punished greatly for that because he had such a step down? Isn't that much worse? And Master said, God's not a tyrant. God recognized who he was. God recognized the conversion that happened and where his desires lay. And God just opened his arms to him. Just with complete, there was nothing to forgive, he said. So God sits back and he watches us. So if we delve into our lower natures, so again, going back to the example of the theater, it's like I was directed to lift up as much as I possibly could the theater that I did, being at Ananda, and attuning to Swami Kriya-yoga. And Swami, because God does not force us in any direction. God does not, he sends us Yogananda, he sends us a guide out, but the guide doesn't force it either. Swami never forced anyone. When there were people that would go to Swami and say, so-and-so is judgmental, they're angry all the time, they're just very hard to work with, can't you talk with them? Swami would say, well, I think I could. And he'd invite them over for dinner, and they'd come to his house for dinner, and he would say really nice things to them and how wonderful they were and blah, blah, blah. And then he'd never bring up the issue of what was going wrong with them, where they were amiss. He never said it. Sometimes he'd wait years before he'd say it. But what he would do is perhaps he'd give a talk, and he would turn to another person and talk about a particular quality that perhaps this person who needed to hear it might be listening to. And then he had the freedom to step back and to really hear what Swami was saying and respond to it in his own time. There was no forcing, there was no kind of coercion. It was just, I'm here. When you're open to me, when you're ready, I'm here. And so Master was the same way. Yogananda is the same way, and God is the same way. And as with the Beatitudes, blessed are the meek, for they shall see, blessed are the meek, listing all of these virtues, but the meek, I had to think about it a lot, and I thought, I think that means blessed are those who have peace in their heart, because that's the way that we can find bliss. Blessed are those who are calm in spirit. Blessed are those who are peaceful. Blessed are those who aren't kind of imposing themselves on the world, because they will inherit the earth. They will see the subtleties of God's direction. Because so many times, even in my own life, I can't tell you how many times I look back on my life and I think, why didn't I see that? Why didn't I see that? Well, I know why I didn't see it. I didn't see it because I was too busy making things happen or working with restless energy. So Master said we have to calm our hearts. That is yoga right there. We have to calm our hearts. We have to calm these likes, these dislikes, these attachments to things. We have to calm them. We don't have to denounce them. We don't have to say, we don't have to be so brutal. We can't do that because God has created it. And delusion is a part of this world. We have no choice but participate with it on a certain level. So what we have to do is purify it and refine it. And once we do that, we start to see the subtleties of the guidance that Yogananda gives us, or the subtleties that maybe Kriya-yoga is giving to you, either through a particular person or an event or a flower, or you don't know in what form it might come. So for us to continue on the path, the real way that we can get out of it is through attunement. And it's through attunement to the Guru. And he says to us, bring your free will to my will and align it. And then you'll know what to do. And then you'll take those steps towards happiness. And it's a one-step process. It's a constant reminder of, I want only you. I want only you, God. And once you're firmly committed to that, you move in that direction towards bliss, and towards freedom, and towards joy.